Major episodes in the history of life we can see occurring on this timeline. Let's go through some highlights that I want to hit up on, because we're not going to go through all the different periods in great detail. Earth was formed. To the best of our knowledge, Earth was formed about 4.6 billion years ago. So on this timeline, origin of Earth appears right here. Prokaryotes. Prokaryotes are defined as the lack of the true nucleus. Pro means before, kary for nucleus, so before a nucleus was formed. And prokaryotes are going to be the majority of this chapter that we're going to discuss, those bacteria and archaea. So we'll head up on that in a bit. Those came first, prokaryotes did. They evolved about 3.8 billion years ago. So here I can see the origin of Earth, and as over time came, boom, I see that yellow line right here, prokaryotes, first origin of life on Earth were the prokaryotes. And I can actually see that they were here for a very long time. They inhabited the Earth well before other organisms even came about. That was about 3.8 billion years ago. They began right here at this pink event. Prokaryotes then started producing oxygen. We can actually see oxygen generated photosynthesis occurring at this timeline here, and prokaryotes started that process. This occurred about 2.7 billion years ago. So, okay, hold on. What about these guys? How did they survive without oxygen? Well, these life forms survived without oxygen by anaerobic means. I taught you guys glycolysis in the cellular respiration chapter. Glycolysis does not need oxygen in order to generate energy. You can have life without oxygen. But autotrophic prokaryotes started existing, yay, so about here. That was 2.7 billion years ago. Without oxygen came first. Eukaryotes then show up on the timeline, those more complicated, more elegant eukaryotes. U stands for true, kary for nucleus, true nucleus. These guys have a nucleus. And they have membrane-bound organelles, as I discussed with you. That appears here at the timeline, so that's about 2.1 billion years ago, and they were not multicelled at first, not like you and I. They were just single-celled eukaryotes, just one cell, and they were able to be organisms with just a single cell. We are going to cover some of these. Then, about 1.5 billion years ago, we see multicellular eukaryotes coming up along the timeline. These more complex organisms existing. Then over time, over much time, we don't see too much of a new event occurring until we hit the Cambrian explosion. Do I actually have the Cambrian explosion? I do. So before I hit up on that, the mitochondria are descendants of smaller prokaryotes. So it's believed, it's hypothesized that mitochondria, remember that the mitochondria is involved in cellular respiration, that beautiful double-membraned organelle, and eukaryotes, as well as the chloroplasts involved in photosynthesis for plants and algae. It's believed that the mitochondria and chloroplasts, those two organelles, descended from prokaryotes, and they gave way to eukaryotes to exist. Cambrian explosion comes up next. We see a vast diversification of animals. Land plants come about. Big bust in different species now. We see about 541 million years ago. If we consider the timeline of the origin of Earth from the first living organism, these guys are actually quite new. They're quite young compared to all those other organisms that have been here for a long time. Us, where do we belong in that timeline? Here we are. This little tiny orange line right here representing humans and how long we have existed in Earth's timeline. Not that long. We're about 195,000 years ago that Homo sapien first came about, modern humans.